from Tom Naughton. I didn't know I was on yet, so excuse me while I fire up different. Talk amongst yourselves. Well, go ahead. You're not giving me profile, buddy. Go ahead. How about a hand for family food? That's better, thank you. So, you made it. Do you feel good? You don't sound like you feel good. Do you feel good? Are you excited about the speakers you're going to see this week? Does anybody think it's hilarious? They're going to teach us to lose weight on an all-you-can-eat cruise. And afterwards, they're going to conduct an AA meeting at a college pecker, ladies and gentlemen. They know all the appropriate venues, so... Okay, I'll just stand here. You know, I used to do stand-up comedy on cruise ships. One of the cruise directors once told me that the average cruise passenger gains a pound per day. I am happy to report, I worked on that ship for 5 weeks. I went home 15 pounds lighter than when I left. Why? I forgot my luggage, that's why. My luggage weighed 35 pounds, you can do the math. That was, of course, before I adopted a low-carb lifestyle. Last cruise, I really did eat like a king, went home 1 pound lighter, and that's really what this is all about, isn't it? You know, learning how to eat and enjoy life, and you're not constantly going through this battle with hunger and frustration. I mean, I spent a good part of my adult life doing that. I was constantly going on these low-fat diets. It's like every week I'd go to the grocery store, I'd stock up on fruits and vegetables. Every other week, go to my fridge, throw out the rotten fruits and vegetables. And that only happened with the foods I was supposed to eat. I never had to throw away the Doritos because they sat around and got stale. I'd buy junk food. It was like, best if eaten before morning. I remember one New Year's, I woke up, got on the scale, I was 217 pounds. I said, okay, that's enough. Very next day, I went out and joined a health club. And in just the first month, I lost over $400. I never gained it back. I was very proud of that. Of course, it didn't help. I drank a lot of beer back in those days. And you know, you see the beer commercials on TV. These guys are always active and playing sports, having fun, surrounded by women with big boobs. So I drank beer. Sure enough, I got big boobs. Then I thought I could lose them by going jogging. That was a good idea. My boobs slapped me so hard it was like jogging with the Three Stooges. Go home, poke myself in the eye just to complete the scene, you know. Stupid for me to go running anyway. I already had bad memories of running from childhood because I was a fat, slow kid. Remember one time in gym class, they had us doing relay races. Last leg of the race comes down to me and another guy. We get our batons at the same time. As soon as he sees he is competing against me, he literally skipped to the finish line. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to lose a foot race to a guy who's skipping? That's why my entire stand-up career, I never did jokes about gay people. I was afraid a gang of hairdressers would skip me down and slap me silly. Put highlights around my bald spot. I don't know. That, of course, was a long time ago. It's all changed now that I feel like, you know, I finally know how to eat, and I am careful about my diet, but I am not one of those obsessive types. I don't want to be one of those, and you know who you are. I was at a restaurant with a friend of mine a while back. She must have spent 5 minutes telling me, you shouldn't put the cream in your coffee unless you know it came from a cow that wasn't treated with hormones. She would have gone on longer, but she had to step outside to smoke a cigarette. Yeah, you got your priorities in order. So I am careful now. I really do feel like I understand how to eat now. That is largely because of the hard work, the dedication, and the kind of speakers we are going to hear this week. So, with that in mind, let's meet our speakers and make fun of them, shall we? We'll start with a guy I'm really looking forward to hearing this week, Dr. Eric Westman. Yeah, give it up for him. Dr. Westman is a co-author of the latest Atkins diet book. He has also done some really impressive research into the benefits of low-carb diets. And I'm a big fan of Dr. Westman's because of how he came around to recommending low-carb diets. You know, he was a doctor. Busy practice. He'd been trained like every other doctor to tell his patients to eat low-fat foods, stay away from the artery-clogging saturated fat. Well, then some patients of his started losing weight, improving their metabolic markers. He asked what they were doing, so they told him, went on the Atkins diet. Now, instead of telling them they were going to kill themselves, he said to himself, maybe I should look into the science of this diet. Maybe some of what we were taught in medical school is wrong. And this behavior was so undoctor-like, the AMA damn near pulled his license. But he stayed in practice, and he'd been treating people with low-carb diets. He's done some really good research in the field. When Dr. Westman is not practicing medicine or doing research, he likes to watch football. He's from Wisconsin, so not surprisingly. Big Green Bay Packers fan. Which got me thinking about his particular interpretation of the Atkins diet. You know, when I was a stand-up, I worked in Green Bay now and then. I happen to know that at Lambeau Field, they are required by law to serve in the concession stands what are considered the 4 basic food groups in Wisconsin. So I got out the Atkins diet book. I went to some of the recipes Dr. Westman had contributed, sure enough. Then I put on my official Michael Moore conspiracy nut hat, and I put 2 and 2 together. I realized Dr. Westman had an ulterior motive for writing this book. He wanted to double the stadium revenues at Lambeau Field so the Packers could afford a championship team. Because as you may recall, back in the low-fat days, the Packers kind of sucked. One of the only things I liked about the low-fat days, because I am a Bears fan, and we'll just forget about that. We'll just forget about that Gatorade sitting there. To continue the Michael Moore analysis, Dr. Westman published this book in early 2010. I think you all know what happened in early 2011. So, is the Atkins diet truly an effective diet, or is it all a grand conspiracy cooked up by Dr. Eric Westman to benefit the Green Bay Packers? I'll report, you decide. That's Dr. Eric Westman. Give him a hand. Another speaker I know you're going to enjoy this week, a man I consider a friend, Dr. Andreas Einfeld. Is one of the leaders, in fact, I would say one of the 4-star generals of the low-carb revolution in Sweden. He has a hugely popular blog in Sweden, and I am proud to report that he bowed under the pressure of literally billions of requests and started writing his blog in English as well. I first met Dr. Einfeld at a pre-Kruse dinner 2 years ago. Some of us were waiting for tables, talking, and I'm talking to people, and behind me I hear, "I really liked your movie." I look around, there's nobody there. I go talking to people, "I really liked your movie." There's nobody there. I'm starting to get annoyed, wondering who's messing with me, so I lean back against the wall to survey the room. And I hear, I really liked your movie, but please stop touching me. I've seen Dr. Einfeld give speeches a few times now, and I'm always impressed at how lively and engaging he is, because he's giving these speeches in English, which is not his native language. But at the same time, something was nagging at me. I'm thinking, something familiar about this guy? I can't put my finger on it. Well, then I got thinking about the guy who was the governor of California when I lived there. And I started making comparisons.
I'm a friend of Sarah Connor.
And the reason is I guess I have an obsession since some years ago.
John Connor.
I mean, I never really had any big weight problems.
In a cybernetic organism.
Trying to experimenting with it on myself.
Hey, I'm a police officer.
We could do it, take it a step further and take all of that.
I'm wasting my time.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'll be back.
You know, and as we found out a year or so ago, Arnold has not been the most faithful of husbands in the world, and I got thinking how he shot some movie scenes in Sweden. He seems fond of working with Swedish directors. I think you know where I'm going with this, don't you? Yeah, I think our big Swedish doctor is a half Austrian guy. And then I heard that Arnold is grooming some unofficial son to take over his role in the Terminator movies. Now, that might sound far-fetched, but I happen to have acquired a top-secret photo of Dr. Einfeld auditioning for the role. He spent weeks training his eyes to do that. So the point is, be glad you'll hear Dr. Einfeld this week, because once Hollywood snaps him up, he'll never talk to us little people again. That's Dr. Einfeld. Give it up for him. Another doctor you will hear this week, a brilliant neurosurgeon from my own home area of Nashville, Tennessee, Dr. Jack Kruse. Yeah, if you don't know Jack, what do you say about this guy? I guess you can just think of Jack Kruse as being sort of the buckaroo banzai of the low-carb paleo movement. What happened was Jack looked around, he said, yeah, we got doctors, we got some top-notch researchers, we got bloggers who can explain this stuff to the general public, but we're still missing a crucial ingredient to turn this into a truly mass movement, and that is a mystical leader. Someone who can throw out these amazing sayings that sound really enlightening, even though we have no idea what the hell he's talking about. Jack stepped in to fill that void. Now, he thought about going with this look. But of course, it was taken. So he went with the look we all know today. Now, to get some inside information on Jack Kruse, I talked to his wife, Sandy, who told me about some of his, shall we say, unusual traits. For example, he loves to read. In the dark. I said, you mean like Braille? No, real books. He remembers everything he reads. Back one time they had a power outage, the TV went totally dark. Jack stared at it for 2 hours, stood up and told Sandy the book was better. Another Jack Kruse quirk, he meditates to heavy metal music. Well, who doesn't? I think we all associate those two things, don't we? Another Jack Kruse quirk, he's amazingly handy with his toes. Apparently anything he can do with his hands, he can also do with his toes. Sandy told me it's one of the reasons she married him. I did not ask her to elaborate. She did tell me he's the only surgeon in the world who plays guitar during surgery. Keeps him relaxed, apparently. Another Jack Kruse quirk, he talks in his sleep to dead people. And people say doctors don't communicate with their patients. Jackson. Oh, you guys took that one kind of personally. Jack's over there going, sorry, the scalpel slipped out of my toes there at the end. Now, you would never know it to look at him today, but at one time, Jack Kruse weighed 340 pounds. He knew he had to change some things, so he took up meditating, to heavy metal music, of course. He adopted a low-carb paleo lifestyle, and he got lighter and lighter and lighter until he achieved his long-time goal, which was actual levitation. Well, that's the rumor anyway, and I asked him about that when I had him on my podcast show.
Welcome back to the
Fathead
Show with
Tom Naughton, and we're here today talking to Dr. Jack Kruse. Jack, people like to crack jokes about how you're this mystical doctor who speaks in riddles and parables, but I mean, that's not really true, is it? How would you describe Jack Kruse to people who don't know you?
The monk who sold his Ferrari.
Huh. I'm not sure what that means. Is that a reference to some kind of personal experience, or?
Well, the guy who gets on I-40 is kind of the person who smokes.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. Now, I've heard this rumor that you used a combination of low-carb dieting and meditating to heavy metal music to achieve levitation, but that's not actually true, is it? I mean, frankly, that sounds kind of unbelievable.
Look, I want to challenge what you believe. At one time, Galileo and Copernicus told people, that the Earth was not the center of the universe, it was the sun.
So you did learn to levitate?
Correct.
Well, what was it like the first time you found yourself, floating around a room?
Well, you've probably had the experience of trying to hang a picture in your house. And when you hit sheetrock, you know what it feels like, and then when you hit a stud, you know what it feels like. Well, I started hitting a lot more sheetrock than I was studs. I spent about a year doing that.
That sounds kind of traumatic. Were there any negative effects?
Well, one thing led to another, and I went on about, I'd say, a 6-week bender. It was so bad the next day that I had to get help up to the podium, and it created a firestorm, in the medical community.
But it's a positive thing now? You learned how to harness this power?
Correct.
How did you learn to do that?
You have to have total control of your thoughts. Be the change you want to become.
And you think other people could learn to do this too?
I was able to make that connection. And not only that, several people in my family have also done it.
So this is a lot more common than people think.
That's the key. That goes back to my original point. It's the giant circle of life. Everything comes back to the final common pathway.
All right, Dr. Jack Kruse, thanks for coming on.
I appreciate you having me on.
Jack Kruse, our mystical leader, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for him. It all comes back to the circle of life. Oh boy. Next up, my good buddy Fred Hahn, the creator of the slow burn system. This is a tough one for a roaster. I mean, how do you make fun of a physical specimen like Fred Hahn when so many others have beat you to it? I don't want to be redundant, but it's my job, so heck, let's start with the hairstyle, shall we? Now, this may be slightly exaggerated, and I know what you're thinking. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. Yes, Fred and I are both going bald. The difference is, when the hair stopped growing on my head, it did not start growing on every other inch of my body. I've seen Fred in the locker room. He's like a red chia pet with male pattern baldness. Have you guys noticed you never see Fred when there's a full moon out? There's a reason for that. Fred's not a big fan of running. You kind of have to when the neighbors are chasing you with torches and pitchforks. I met Fred 2 years ago. He was in great shape then. I saw him again last year. He'd lost 15 pounds. You know what he did? Shaved his back. Then he sold the hair to some other guy. That's a hot look in Hollywood. They call it the Fred head. Now, body hair issues aside, Fred Hahn is a good-looking guy. He's well-built. He has a nice speaking voice. I always kind of wondered if maybe Fred missed his true calling. Can't you picture Fred as an actor? Something like this? Well, seriously, what's the difference between these two guys besides a toupee and some acting talent? Oh, I hear you groaning. I didn't say who had the acting talent. Because a couple of weeks ago, I sat down to watch the movie Quiz Show for the second time. Guess what I saw?
No, sir, they had no knowledge whatsoever.
Herb Stiff. Herbie, how about a picture you and Van Doren together?
No, not now. Christ, look at the guy.
Come on, the both of you.
You know what the problem with you bums is? You never leave a guy alone, unless you're leaving him alone.
Recognize anybody? All right, maybe this will help you out. Well, suddenly the rationale behind that whole slow burn system started to make sense to me. Because, I had a couple small parts in Hollywood. If you're not a big star, they treat you like cattle. It's easy to get resentful about it. It just never occurred to me to torture people as a form of compensation. Fred gets these big shots working out in his studio. He's like, hey, I know you. You're a film producer, right? Well, I got a workout for you, buddy. All right, I don't want to scare anybody away from slow burn. It's a great workout system. It's what I do. I'm stronger than I've ever been. I encourage you to take slow burn with Fred this week. I know he'll be teaching it on the class because it is a great workout and I like picking you out afterwards. I can always spot you. You're kind of shuffling along, pretending you feel okay, until you get to the stairs. Oh God, no, not the stairs. Climb these stairs, I'm gonna moan like a bad actor in a Japanese porno, I swear to God. Fred's over there going, don't forget the importance of recovery time. Really? Heck, I was gonna do this again tomorrow. Now I know some of you were thinking I better be careful up here. Fred's a powerful guy. I could be taking my life in my own hands. Well, the reason I'm not scared is you can see in this picture last year. Fred and I had a little disagreement over dinner, and as I think you can tell, I was suggesting we step outside. Fred wouldn't go. You know why? There were lobsters in the kitchen Fred hadn't eaten yet, that's why. For those of you who weren't here last year, Fred is kind of like the Pol Pot of Lobsterland. We saw thousands of them escaping in the lifeboats. The ones who couldn't escape started wearing disguises. That's Fred Hahn, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for him. Now let me see who is the next friend I'm going to lose tonight up here. Ah, it's Dr. Volek. Do it again. Dr. Jeff Volek from the University of Connecticut. Dr. Volek has done some real cutting-edge research into the benefits of carbohydrate restriction. It was, for example, Dr. Volek who demonstrated that the amount of saturated fat in your blood is determined not by how much saturated fat you eat, but by how much carbohydrate you eat. So as he likes to tell people, contrary to what you have been told, you are not what you eat. And that's a good thing, or Dr. Volek would be a 200-pound tin of nuts. Dr. Volek has been known to consume several pounds of nuts in a single sitting, which I think explains his contribution to this book. Now, most of us who are health conscious are willing to forgive ourselves one bad habit, but not Dr. Volek. No. He's the kind of dynamic individual who needs two bad habits. So besides being a nut freak, he is also a huge coffee freak. Which caused some professional embarrassment when the Red Cross told him to please stop donating blood. Turns out surgeons don't like it when their patients snap awake on the operating table. And their monitors go from beep, beep, beep to pop, 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 pop. One guy got the Volek blood, came out of surgery going, doctor, I swear, I left my body, went through a brilliant white tunnel, and I talked to Juan Valdez. Some doctor named Jack Kruse was there too, I don't know. Well, despite those bad habits, Dr. Volek is a very fit guy, a powerful guy. He was a champion power lifter back in the day. Once lifted 3 times his own body weight. That was in the nut section at Costco. Because as he told me, shopping carts are for sissies. I saw him working out one time. He had this huge leather belt around the middle. I asked why he was wearing the thing. He said, because I lift so much weight, without this belt, my guts would pop out. I said, you know, doctor, I think it might be a little dangerous to get that strong. I'm lifting something heavy. I'd rather my muscles just quit on me somewhat before my intestines burst through my abdominal wall. I asked Dr. Volek how he became interested in weightlifting. Well, it turns out it was from one of those formative experiences some boys have. He made it all the way to the national finals in the punt, pass, and kick competition. Now, as you probably know, the finals are held in an NFL stadium at halftime. So there he is, the Pontiac Silverdome, 80,000 fans in the stands, millions of people watching on TV. He does well in the punting. He does great in the passing. And now the national championship has come down to his last kick. So the future Dr. Volek rears back, kicks as hard as he can, looks up. Did it stop after 30 yards? No. Did it stop after 40 yards? No. After 50 yards? No. Could it be? Yes. That ball went 6 feet over there. Off the side of his foot, wobbling around like a wounded duck. Millions of fans are cheering and hooting and hollering, engaging in the psychological version of kicking sand in his face. So he vowed, like Charles Atlas before him, he would turn himself into the kind of powerful physical specimen no man would ever taunt again. Which is why I will not be shaking his hand after tonight's performance. That's Dr. Volek. Give it up for him, Jeff Volek. Next up, Monique Forslund. Monique comes to us from Sweden by way of South Africa. Not quite sure how that works, but we're glad she's here. Monique is also a dedicated health and fitness blogger and a dedicated instructor of the Zumba dance and exercise system. I know, it's just fun to say, isn't it? Let's all do that on 3. 1, 2, 3. Zumba! You guys are good. If you were with us last year, you know Monique is a hugely energetic person. She's also a very fit, very attractive woman. What you may not know is that one time Monique weighed almost 90 pounds more than she does now. True. You know, she told me she used to be that fat girl who hung out in the back of the room trying to hide herself in the big XX sweaters. Not anymore. Monique discovered the low-carb lifestyle. She found a form of exercise that's fun and effective, and just look at what that combination has done for this woman's body. Well, you see what I mean? 10 years ago, she couldn't even have lifted those things. Now she can lift them, turn them, shake them, twist them, dance with them, and people are lining up to pay to watch her do it. So Monique's very fit now. She's helping a lot of other people get fit. I'm sorry to report she does have one addiction. For some reason, she feels compelled to apply lip gloss 300-400 times per day. So at this point, her lips are so permanently oily and glossy, she can chew on cardboard. By the time she swallows it, it's a high-fat meal. Last time a doctor made the mistake of sticking a thermometer in her mouth, she sneezed, the thermometer killed a nurse in the next round. Like a blowgun shot. So anyway, last year a couple of us thought it would be funny to put a little super glue in Monique's lip gloss. That was a bad idea. Well, I apologize. Monique's a beautiful woman, and that's not the most flattering picture. Let me switch it out. Monique will be teaching Zumba this week. I encourage you to take a class. If you do, don't let her kiss you afterwards. And if she does, stay out of the sun for a while. That's Monique Forslund. Give it up for her. Well, this guy probably needs no introduction, but it's Dr. William Davis. We're very glad to have him here. Dr. Davis is, of course, a brilliant cardiologist, one of the few who uses diet not just to stop heart disease, but to actually reverse heart disease. He's a very dedicated blogger, but I think we can all agree the greatest contribution of his career so far has been an awesome book called Wheat Belly. Wheat Belly. Wheat Belly is one of those books, rare books really, that just turns people's lives around. I actually want to read you just one comment somebody left on my blog about Wheat Belly. I'm a 45-year-old man. I've been overweight most of my life. In grade school, other kids used to call me pork belly. Even as an adult, some of my friends called me pork belly, and I always laughed even though it bothered me. Then Dr. Davis published his terrific book. Now people call me wheat belly. You know, it really doesn't bother me as much. Thank you, Dr. Davis. Thank you. Stories like that get you, don't they? Well, Wheat Belly's been making a big splash not only with the public, but also in the health and medical communities. In fact, Dr. Davis was recently at a conference of cardiologists, and his colleagues gave him a truly rare honor. They got together and voted him most likely to be killed by Monsanto. They had a little mock funeral and everything. That was nice. Actually, some of us on the Kruse have a pool going on exactly how Dr. Davis will be killed by Monsanto. The scuba diving category is still open if you'd like to participate. Some people have suggested Dr. Davis could, improve his odds of survival if he toned down the wheat belly thing, but we know he's not going to do that. He's a laser-focused kind of guy, so take advantage of the chance to hear the man speak before he ends up in a shallow grave. Dr. Davis, everybody, give it up for him. Another speaker we're delighted to have back is Jacqueline Everstein. Should I even roast this woman? She seems incredibly popular. Well, I'm sure most of you know, Jackie Everstein spent many, many years as the nurse for the late, great Dr. Robert Atkins. She was also a co-author on one of the Atkins books. What some of you may not know is how she ended up being the nurse for the late, great Dr. Robert Atkins. Here's the situation. She's fresh out of nursing school, looking for a job. Gets called in for an interview with some doctor in New York City. About halfway through the interview, it occurs to her who she's talking to. So, what does this fresh out of nursing school job candidate say to one of the most famous doctors in the world? She did. So the doctor leaned back in his chair, kind of looked at her and said, "Can you start on Monday?" True story. Jackie's job interview strategies are now taught at Harvard Business School. And of course, it was Jackie who inspired this scene from a popular TV show.
There's someone here I'd like you to meet. This is Mr. Costanza. He's one of the applicants.
Nice to meet you.
Well, I wish I could say the same, but I must say, with all due respect, I find it very hard to see the logic behind some of the moves you have made with this fine organization. In the past 20 years, you have caused myself and the city of New York a good deal of distress, as we have watched you take our beloved Yankees and reduce them to a laughingstock, all for the glorification of your massive ego.
Hire this man.
When quiz show was on earlier, was it showing on the screen? No. Well, it sure worked well in rehearsals. Okay, that was the scene from Seinfeld where George tells off Steinbrenner and gets hired, so sorry that didn't play. In addition to her work in the low-carb community, Jackie's known as a huge Civil War buff. She thought about teaching history. Some of her heroes from the Civil War era include General George McClellan, General Henley Halleck, and of course the prop master for John Wilkes Booth. You know, Jackie's been doing a lot of work both as a writer and as a speaker, so it kind of surprised me. I sent her this question, and it surprised me when I got back this answer. So I told her, you know, I can help with that. I give you some tips. I was a stand-up comedian for a lot of years. She wrote back. So she's my manager now. That's Jackie Everstein. Give it up for her. Another speaker, one I'm really looking forward to hearing, is Masterjohn. Kruse is a fascinating guy because he is a lipidologist. He knows practically everything there is to know about the complicated science of fatty acids, cholesterol, and how they affect our health. It's a really complex subject, which got me wondering, if you were to think back on the people you knew in high school, how would you pick out a future lipidologist in the crowd? What kind of teenager becomes a lipidologist? Here's your answer. So there's your career path. If the grunge rock thing doesn't work out, you become a lipidologist. Of course, it takes a lot of brain power to become a lipidologist, so I greased some palms. I got a hold of Kruse's high school transcripts. Sure enough, our future lipidologist left high school with a grade point average of... Which makes perfect sense. You know, you're pulling just below a C, your guidance counselor's going to tell you garbage collector, congressman, lipidologist. Now, I think what happened was back then, even as a young man, Kruse understood school shouldn't just be about academics, obviously. He wanted to be a well-rounded guy, so he took up one of those extracurricular activities, you know, the kind that really make college admissions officers stand up and take notice. I'm referring, of course, to juggling. He did. Hello, Harvard, I'm a C student who juggles. Do you have any openings in a lipidologist program? Yes, a scholarship would be great. Thank you very much. Now, most jugglers learn how to juggle using things like, you know, bean bags or bowling pins. Well, Kruse couldn't afford that kind of equipment, so he learned to juggle with, true story, rocks. Which might explain that grade point average. So I asked him about that and a couple other things when I had him on my podcast show.
Welcome back to the
Fathead
show with
Tom Naughton. Kruse, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You know, I've been trying to get you on for months. I'm just totally jazzed that you're finally here.
I feel kind of like that when I eat liver.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, and the first thing I wanted to talk about with you was your grade point average in high school. Is it really true your GPA was 1.8?
That is how I essentially came to where I am now.
Wow, very surprising. Well, in that case, where do you think you would be right now if you had applied yourself a little more and gotten, I don't know, say 2.1 GPA?
I am not sure how much it would be even possible.
Well, just hypothetically.
Probably be, somewhere with a mouthful of tooth decay, trying to figure out why I was disabled at the age of, in my late 20s.
Okay, that makes sense, sort of. Now, I also heard that in addition to being a mediocre student, you used to spend a lot of time juggling with big rocks.
That's absolutely true.
Did those rocks ever, say, land on your head? I'm thinking maybe getting smacked in the head with rocks had something to do with that lousy grade point average.
Are you joking?
No, I'm dead serious. Smacking yourself in the head with rocks on a regular basis can't possibly be good for your brain, don't you think?
There's all sorts of theories that at this point are really at the hypothesis stage about why this might be harmful.
Well, has anyone studied the effects of constant head smacking? I mean, scientifically?
Not only in a scientific way, but also in a political way and in a social way.
Okay, and what kind of effects are they seeing on brain function?
This is very much like the decrease in brain cell proliferation that occurs in mental retardation. It's like the Black Eyed Peas song.
I don't think I know that one. Can you sing a little bit of it?
Sure.
Wow, you're good. Back in your younger days, I understand you were quite a clarinet player. What kind of music did you play on the clarinet? Was it mostly jazz or swing or big band?
Nasty heavy metals or any of these nasty things that go around breaking molecules.
You know, honestly, I've never heard of a heavy metal band with a clarinet before. Maybe Dr. Jack Kruse has, but what kind of reaction does that combination have on an audience?
Heart attack, stroke, and they have major gastrointestinal disorders, digestive disorders.
And how did the other members of the band feel about having a clarinet player in the group?
They said, we're going to have to switch to doing drugs.
I see. Well, how does that happen exactly? I mean, what, you're backstage with these guys before a show, one of them gets out a little bag and a mirror and...
All of a sudden the line disappears.
Really? I know you're really conscientious about your diet these days, but I remember when I was in college, the people who would do drugs would go on these amazing eating binges afterwards. Did that ever happen with your band?
It was equal to consuming a little under 2 million peanut butter sandwiches contaminated with the maximum allowed aflatoxin contamination by the US government.
You know, I don't want to be gross or anything, but if I ate like that before a show, I'm pretty sure I'd end up getting sick all over the stage at some point. Did that ever happen to you?
Sure.
What did you say to the other guys in the band?
Well, I'm sorry, but it probably came from the chicken.
And they believed you?
Do you have any friends who you expect to feed you 2 million peanut butter sandwiches?
No, can't say I do. Is that your definition of a good friend?
I would say, you know what, buddy? I know that your 2 million contaminated peanut butter sandwiches are nothing but a gift to me out of your love for me. I would eat those 2 million peanut butter sandwiches.
Well, sounds like you guys were a really close group and had some good times together.
That is how I essentially came to where I am now.
And on that note, it's time to wrap up the show. Thank you, Chris.
It's a great honor and pleasure to be here, guys.
Another speaker I know you're going to enjoy this week comes to us all the way from jolly old England, Dr. John Briffa. Give it up for him. Dr. Briffa is one of the doctors leading the low-carb revolution, we hope, in the UK. We hope to get that like we've already seen in Sweden. He's a very busy guy. He appears on TV a lot over there. He has a great blog, which I read regularly. He also recently published a terrific book. Have you had a chance to see this? Very good book. I highly recommend it. And I think one of the smartest things he did from a marketing perspective was put this right there on the front cover. I had the pleasure of reading this book when he sent it to me and asked for feedback. Unfortunately, he didn't go for any of my marketing ideas. And I'm glad Dr. Briffa is leading the charge in the UK, but I hope we see a lot more of him in the US because he has a couple of traits that, frankly, even people like Dr. Westman and Dr. Volek and Dr. Davis just don't have. Namely, really awesome hair and a cool British accent. And look at that, Moses couldn't part that hair. Americans, of course, have long been fascinated by British people with awesome hair and cool accents. In fact, there is just something about that British accent that makes everything they say sound classier and more intelligent, don't you think? Absolutely. Just one example. Listen to me talking about the U.S. government's My Plate, and then listen to Dr. Briffa saying almost exactly the same thing about the UK government's Eat Well Plate. Here's me.
I swear, these f***ing idiots at the USDA have been pushing the same f***ing for 35 years now. It clearly isn't working. All it's done is a whole generation of fat diabetics, which is why I want all of us out there to keep hammering home the message, do not listen to these f***ing morons.
Now here's Dr. Briffa saying pretty much the same thing.
Even though large tracts of the government have fallen into the grip of the anti-fat Gestapo and all the odious apparatus of pharmaceutical rule, we shall not flag or fail. We shall fight in the supermarkets. We shall fight in the schools and universities. We shall fight with bacon. We shall fight with butter. We shall fight with eggs and sausages and nicely marbled filet mignons. We shall fight with coconut oil. And we shall never surrender.
See how that accent makes all the difference? Well, I asked Dr. Briffa how he became so interested in diet and health. Turns out it stems from an experience he had as a teenager. See, he and some of his teenage buddies ate a bunch of junk food one weekend and they all ended up constipated. Or as the British like to say, with that classier way they have of putting things, they got bunged up. Well, after a couple days of comparing notes, I guess, one of these little geniuses came up with an idea for how to turn what would be a negative experience and turn it into something fun. Now, if I explain this plan in my American accent, it could come out sounding stupid. So I'm going to switch to a British accent so you don't get the wrong idea. Here's what his buddy came up with. You know, as long as we're all bunged up anyway, we should turn it into a contest. Let's just see who can hold it the longest. Yes, we just pray they went with the honor system on this. Well, I'm sorry to report that after a week of valiant effort, the future Dr. Briffa lost that contest, and he lost it in spectacular style. He'd blown away the competition a whole new meaning. He lost because of a tactical decision, which again would sound stupid if I just told you about it, so I'm going to recreate his thought process with the British accent. You know, this very important contest, I'm really feeling the pressure, especially when I sit down. It would probably take the edge off if I went out and drank a couple gallons of beer. I mean, it won't even count, we're on the metric system. Then I should go for a long walk, you know, far away from people and noise and the nearest loo. What could possibly go wrong? Can you guess what went wrong? The future doctor found himself in the middle of a medical emergency with no suitable place to operate. He tried applying a tourniquet. That didn't help. So he sort of went out to a grassy field, dropped his trousers, and lost the contest, along with his pride and a few other things we won't mention. After that, he wanted to see if he could examine his failure. Looks around, doesn't see anything. So what does this brilliant, future, highly respected doctor conclude from this finding, or lack of finding? Once again, you need to hear it with a British accent. Blimey, I think it disappeared. I guess the alcohol made it all evaporate. So he reached up, pulled up his trousers. That's when he realized his theories on organic chemistry needed some work. In fact, he realized dropping his trousers at all had merely been a waste of time. Well, you don't want to go home and explain this failure to your parents, so he managed to stagger all the way to the seashore, hop in for a little swim there in Mother Nature's laundromat, which is why no one has spotted a shark in that area for the last 30 years. Then he staggered under a pier, and when the beer and the hangover and all that wore off, he knew his mission in life. He said to himself, no matter what it takes, when I grow up, I'm going to be a man with awesome hair. That's Dr. Briffa. He's a good sport for you and telling me that story. Now, the last speaker I get to roast this week is Denise Minger. I'm sure you're all familiar with Denise because of her outstanding analysis of T. Colin Campbell's China study. An analysis which prompted Dr. Campbell to announce he had discovered a new principle of science. I met Denise at the Ancestral Health Symposium in Los Angeles. I was in the back of the room trying to find a seat. I saw her over there, and frankly, that kind of surprised me. Because I had heard from some very reliable sources that there actually was no Denise Minger. You see, the speculation was the meat industry got together and created this Denise Minger person to cast doubt on the fine work of T. Colin Campbell. And this made perfect sense to me. Because I could see these meat executives sitting around a smoky room, tearing into their bloody steaks, you know, and afterwards one of them stands up and says, all right, guys, this Campbell character's killing us with this China study of his. We need to create a credible public persona to bring him down. Who's got an idea? I do, Chief. You know, this guy Campbell, he's got a long academic record. He looks like a scientist. He sounds like a scientist. Hell, he is a scientist. We're going to create someone to go toe-to-toe with this guy in a science debate. I think it should be a 23-year-old English major who looks like this. Your average vegetarian guy sees this. What's the first thing he's thinking? Statistical analysis. Well, because of this highly realistic scenario, I kind of thought that was Denise Minger sitting there, but I wasn't sure. There were people who say she doesn't exist, and I knew I could be hallucinating because I had flown American Airlines to Los Angeles, and they had gotten me there about 12 hours late. So there I am, no sleep, dead on my feet. I think that's her. I might be hallucinating, so I thought, you know, I'm a speaker at this thing. I don't want anybody to see me talking to an empty chair. I talked to enough empty chairs when I gave a speech in Washington recently. You don't want to do that. So I said, heck, before I say anything, I should probably reach out and pinch her to make sure she's real. About halfway there, I thought, you know, that could be misinterpreted. And I don't want to go home and tell my wife a good-looking hallucination gave me a black eye. So I introduced myself, I got to know her a little bit. Later I had her on my podcast. I said...
Welcome back to the
Fathead
Show with Jimmy
Naughton. Denise, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited that you let me come back.
Well, actually, this is the first time you've been on the show, but as I'm sure you probably remember, we did meet in person at the Ancestral Health Symposium back in August.
And that really freaked me out.
Really? Do you mind telling me why?
Just because I was really sickened by it.
I see. You know, you were cordial enough and everything, so I just kind of assumed you had seen Fathead, maybe even liked it.
From what I've heard, it is not very interesting in terms of entertaining people.
So you don't think Fathead served any purpose whatsoever?
It's about as useful as my English degree, and it's masquerading under the name of science.
Uh-huh. You know, given how this is going so far, I probably shouldn't even ask if you have an opinion about my blog.
How can I describe this? It's a word that I'm not allowed to say on your show.
Well, as you can tell, it wasn't going well and the gloves had come off. So I decided to raise a topic with Denise that I planned on skipping, just to be nice.
Denise, I recently received an email from someone at VegSource who told me the real reason you went after T. Colin Campbell had nothing to do with any flaws in the China study, and that it was, in fact, a case of a woman scorned.
It's just bogus. It is bogus.
Well, this person at VegSource told me you had a fling with Campbell, and then he rejected you. Is there any truth to that?
Again, completely unfounded. There's no... I'm getting worked up. I hate the distortion of the truth. I really do.
Well, Denise, this same person sent me some... well, let's just call them embarrassing photos of you and Campbell together, and I am looking at them right now. Does that blow your mind a little?
Oh, yes, my mind is blown. I didn't even imagine that so many people out there would be interested.
Then can we maybe agree it's time you stop denying the rumors and just talk about what happened between you and Dr. Campbell?
Mm-hmm. I agree completely. Yes.
Okay, good. Let's start at the beginning. What the heck were you thinking, getting involved with T. Colin Campbell?
Well, I didn't really have any expectations when I went into it. I was just kind of curious because I really had no idea what was going to happen.
Curiosity, yeah, but what could have possibly attracted you to this guy?
I never really fit in with my peer group, and I liked people who were older.
But he's an old man, Denise, and he doesn't really strike me as the charming type.
I don't know what he did. He worked his magic.
Well, okay, looking at it from the other direction, what do you think he saw in you?
I guess it was because I looked horrible and had like the dark circles and the stringy hair. I don't know, just massively underweight.
So it's because you looked like a typical vegan?
Yes.
But you're young enough to be his granddaughter. Isn't that a little weird? When you're with someone that much older, what do you even say to the guy?
Come on, Campbell, stop peeing on my shoe. Just stop it.
I see. Sounds very romantic.
It's funny because I spent so many years in those shoes.
So what was it like being involved with the great Dr. Campbell?
Very strange, very odd.
So once you were together, where did you think this was going to end up?
Pregnancy, lactation, young children, and so forth.
What, are you kidding me? He's 77 years old.
I noticed that I was feeling sick afterwards.
I wasn't really referring to you. I was referring to his abilities at that age.
I was willing to kind of gloss over its flaws. I figured it wasn't going to get a lot of circulation. But I was not skeptical enough to really care that much about taking it apart.
Well, how about now that Campbell ended the relationship?
I'm probably going to turn some kind of death ray on that.
You know, I think a lot of us would like to see that.
Oh, they'll love it, yeah.
Well, we're about out of time, Denise. Listen, I'm sorry if I embarrassed you bringing up this whole Campbell thing, but you know, you kind of went after me, so I figured fair's fair.
It makes sense. It's not a cool strategy, but I understand it.
All right, Denise, thanks for coming on the show.
Denise Minger. Well, those are the end of the speakers we're going to talk about, but I would, of course, be remiss if I didn't say a few words about the gentleman who is most responsible for bringing us here. I am talking, of course, about the one, the only Jimmy Moore. How do you describe Jimmy Moore? You know, I think my 6-year-old daughter, Alana, captured it pretty well. We were explaining to her, you know, we're going to go on a cruise, we're going to see some friends, including Jimmy Moore. You remember Jimmy Moore, don't you? He stayed at our house one time. I'm not sure I remember. What does he look like? I said, well, he's really tall, he has dark hair, he has blue eyes. To which Alana replied, well, fortunately for the rest of the world, Jimmy turned down an offer to join the Jonas Brothers and turned his considerable energy to educating people about health and nutrition, and he has done that in every form of media known to man. He started, of course, with the Live and La Vida Low-Carb blog. Then he moved on to putting videos on YouTube. Then he gave us the Live and La Vida Low-Carb audio podcast. Then he wrote some books. Now, at this point, a normal person might decide he had done enough for the world. But Jimmy Moore is not a normal person. So he carried on and brought us low-carb conversations with Jimmy Moore and friends. And then he brought us Ask the Low-Carb Experts. And he still isn't finished. Because in upcoming months, Jimmy is going to bring us friends of people who eat low-carb. And ask the people who once met a low-carb expert. And of course, low-carb experts with awesome hair and cool accents. Now we all know Jimmy's an energetic guy, we all know he's a nice guy, but Jimmy Moore is also a fun guy. And he is fun in spite of the fact he's one of the only people in this group who doesn't drink. And after getting to know Jimmy, I know why he doesn't drink. Because Jimmy Moore is the rare individual who can act like a drunk even when he's sober. To show you what I mean on that, I went to one of those websites where they ask you a bunch of questions and then tell you if you're drunk. Let's see how they apply to Jimmy. First question, do you sing in public for no apparent reason? Do you believe singing louder equals singing better? After singing in public, do you leap off the stage and bang your head on heavy equipment? When you sing in public, do your friends need to help you leave the room? Do you share your feelings with them? Are you losing your ability to focus? Do you sometimes lose control of your mouth? And now this one was for the big points. Do you think women who look like this are actually women who look like this? That is a reference, of course, to the Kimkins episode. Jimmy once asked me to please never mention it again, so I figure deep down he thinks it's funny. Jimmy, I want to thank you for inviting me to my 3rd low-carb cruise. It's always a blast. I love meeting people who read the blogs. I always learn so much from the speakers you have, the doctors, the researchers, the health experts, so thank you for that. Most of all, thank you for all the other doctors, researchers, health experts that you have shared with the world on your blog for all these years now. That is making a difference. I am 53 years old. I'm leaner, stronger, healthier than I was 20 years ago. That is because I've learned so much, had this great ongoing education from the people that you bring on your podcast. I know there are, a couple hundred people in this room who will tell you the same thing. Not to mention thousands of people who aren't in this room who would tell you the same thing if they could. Now, for whatever reason, you've had your critics lately. Why anybody would want to pick on you is beyond me. But you've been handling that with grace, with courage. You've been a gentleman. We all know you are. So I just want to say, keep doing what you're doing. You are making a difference. You have done more than anybody I know to educate people so they can turn around their health and turn around their lives by turning around their health. Jimmy, I'm glad I know you. I'm proud to call you my friend, and I love you too.